The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the expansive fields that surrounded Sarah's small farmhouse. She stood by the paddock, her heart heavy with a mix of solitude and longing. The house felt like a hollow shell without. Her husband, who had left for a month-long business trip, leaving her to confront the quietude that enveloped their lives. Every creak of the floorboards echoed through her mind, amplifying her loneliness. Feeling suffocated by the stillness, she took a deep breath, brushing her fingers through her tousled hair. What is life without companionship? She whispered to herself, feeling the weight of emptiness pressing down on her. The laughter and warmth of shared moments faded to a distant memory, leaving her all alone. But just then, a familiar sound cut through the silence, the rhythmic thud of hooves meeting earth. With a flutter of hope in her chest, she turned to see Jake, her loyal gelding, trotting toward her. His glossy coat gleamed under the waning sun, and his large, wise eyes twinkled with an intelligence that felt almost human. "Oh, Jake," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with a mix of joy and relief. As he approached, she couldn't help but smile through her sadness. He seemed to sense her need, nuzzling against her palm as she held out her hand. "Always knew where to find me, didn't you?" she said softly, her heart swelling with affection. In that moment, it was as if Jake was the only creature in the world that understood her heartache. While her husband was away, Jake had become her steadfast companion, an unspoken promise of support in times of need. She'd always thought of him as more than just a horse. He was her confidant, a friend in a world that had started to feel too big. As she saddled him up, Sarah poured out her heart to him. "You know how it is, right?" she said, tightening the girth. "Sometimes life feels like an endless cycle of waiting and wondering. I feel like I'm losing myself bit by bit." Jake's ears perked up as if he was absorbing every word, and in that moment she knew he was the only one who understood the depths of her turmoil. Mounting him, Sarah felt weightless. Together, they rode out onto the broad expanse of pasture, the soft grass swaying beneath them. The rhythm of Jake's hooves was reassuring, a steady beat that mirrored her pulse. As they cantered through the fields, the worries of the world melted away. The air was alive with the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth, and she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind brush against her skin. "You're all I have right now, Jake," she confessed, the words spilling from her lips like a secret. There was no judgment in his gaze, only understanding. As they rode deeper into the fields, she began to feel a connection that transcended words. With the sun sinking beneath the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, she urged Jake into a gallop. The adrenaline surged through her veins, a feeling of freedom she hadn't experienced in ages. The symphony of wind and hooves resonated in her ears, drowning out the silence that had grown too familiar. "Look at us," she shouted into the wind, her laughter echoing across the open land. It felt as if she was shedding the weight of her worries, one gallop at a time. In those fleeting moments, she was reminded of who she was, a passionate rider, fierce and free. But as they slowed back to a walk, the weight of her reality crept back in. The shadows grew longer, and with them came the inevitable silence of the farmhouse that awaited her return. Riding back, she felt the familiar pang of uncertainty gnawing in her stomach. How long could this bond with Jake fill the void created by her husband's absence? Pulling him to a stop at the edge of the paddock, she dismounted, sadness creeping back into her heart. She gave him a reassuring pat. "It's just you and me for now," she said, her voice steady yet laced with melancholy. "I hope that's enough." As she unsaddled him, a sense of dread mingled with her affection. Would her husband return with the same warmth, or would their connection remain as distant as the fading sun overhead? She couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside her, and perhaps in him as well. Jake seemed to sense her tension, nudging her gently with his muzzle. It was a simple gesture, yet it reminded her of the strength they shared. This wasn't just a partnership, it was a lifeline. In the quiet moments spent together, she found the courage to begin exploring the depths of her feelings. She needed to confront not just the fear of loneliness, but the uncertainty of her place in a life that felt increasingly distant. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, the quiet stillness pressed down on her like a thick blanket. She stared at the ceiling, the weight of her husband's absence a constant reminder of what was missing in her life. Jake's soft whinny from the barn below offered her a semblance of comfort. He was never far, always ready to lend a presence. That felt grounding in her turmoil. She drifted to sleep, imagining Jake's warm body beside Hera, a comforting sight that dissolved her insecurities, if only for a moment. He was her anchor, her confidant, and in a world that felt uncertain, she found solace in their undeniable connection. No matter what lay ahead, one thing was clear: Jake would follow her everywhere, bringing warmth and companionship into her solitary days. And as the stars blanketed the night sky, Sarah's heart began to stir with the promise of hope, of lessons learned, paths explored, and the realization that even in solitude she would find her way. With Jake by her side, she was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their bond would only grow stronger on the journey to come. Storm and shelter, the following days passed in a blur of barn chores, quiet sunsets, and endless thoughts. Sarah woke each morning with a blend of hope and apprehension. As she sipped her coffee, the silence felt heavier than ever, an ever-present reminder of her husband's absence. Her heart often ached for him, longing for the laughter and warmth of their shared moments. But as morning light streamed through the kitchen window, Jake's familiar whinny from the barn broke through her. Melancholy like a burst of sunlight. "Time for some riding, buddy," she said, grabbing her jacket and heading outside. The crisp air greeted her as she made her way to the paddock, the frosty grass crunching beneath her boots. The rhythmic sound of Jake's hooves against the stable floor echoed a sense of comfort as she approached. She saddled him with deft hands, whispering sweet nothings into his ear as if he were the only one who could truly understand her feelings. But even as she prepared, a dark cloud hung in the distance, ominously creeping closer. The air began to change, growing thick with tension, and the first rumblings of thunder rolled in the distance. Feeling a twinge of anxiety, Sarah looked up, scanning the sky for the oncoming storm. "Let's make this quick," she decided, mounting Jake and urging him into a brisk trot. The wind whipped through her hair, and for a brief moment, the impending storm felt like an exhilarating challenge rather than a source of fear. They galloped across the fields, the thrill of speed coursing through her veins. But just as suddenly as the joy arrived, the first drops of rain began to fall, splattering against the earth. Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach, the heaviness of the oncoming storm echoing her internal turmoil. Reluctantly, she pulled Jake to a halt. "We can't be out in this, Jake," she said, her voice shaky as the rain began to drench the landscape. She turned him toward the barn, feeling panic rise in her chest as the thunder grew closer. Back inside the barn, they were greeted by the earthy scent of hay and the comforting sounds of Jake's movements. He seemed unfazed by the turmoil outside, grazing calmly in the corner while Sarah busied herself reinforcing the barn doors. But as the wind howled and the storm unleashed its fury, the once safe haven began to feel more like a prison. Hours passed as Sarah remained trapped in the barn alongside Jake. The thunder rattled through the walls, and she couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom weighing down on her. She slumped against the wall, feeling the weight of her loneliness permeate every corner of her heart. What if her husband never returned? What would that mean for her? The storm raged outside, mirroring her internal struggles. She leaned back against Jake's strong frame, seeking solace in his warmth as the winds howled like wild beasts outside. "You and I are all we have right now, huh?" she whispered, her fingers brushing across his sleek coat. Jake nickered softly, as if reassuring her. As the storm ramped up, the power flickered, plunging the barn into a hazy darkness. Sarah's heart raced. The idea of being alone in the dark felt overwhelmingly claustrophobic. Every creak and groan of the structure sounded like a whisper of her fears. "I can't let this overwhelm me," she said aloud, trying to summon strength. "You're here with me. We'll get through this." But as the storm reached its peak, the wind howled violently, rattling the barn doors. Suddenly, an unexpected crash echoed outside, causing her to jump to her feet. Adrenaline surged through her, and she clutched Jake's halter tightly, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. "What was that?" she whispered, heart pounding in her chest. With a deep breath, she edged closer to the barn door, peering through a small gap. The world outside had transformed into a swirling, chaotic mess of rain and debris. It felt as if nature itself was unleashing its wrath, and fear gripped her heart. A flash of lightning illuminated the landscape for a split second, and she saw a large branch snap off a nearby tree, crashing to the ground. "We need to make sure everything is secure," she muttered, rushing back to Jake. But as she turned to him, she could see that he was restless, his large eyes darting toward the darkness beyond the barn. "Jake, it's okay. she coaxed, but her voice trembled as she realized his unease was reflected in her own heart. They both felt vulnerable, isolated in their refuge while chaos reigned outside. Just then, the power flickered back on. The barn glowed with a faint, warm light, and Sarah felt a surge of relief. Clenching her fists, she chided herself. This wasn't the time to panic. She needed to be strong not just for herself, but for Jake, too. "Come on, big guy, let's check on the paddock," she said, leading him to the door. The storm still raged, but opening the door created a feeling of freedom. Together, they stepped into the tempest, the wind whipping at their faces. Navigating through the howling winds, she guided Jake back towards the paddock. As they moved, she felt a different kind of rush, a sense of empowerment igniting within her. This was a challenge they could face together. The storm may have felt like it was tearing her world apart, but alongside Jake, she felt a fierce resilience stirring within her soul. Finally, they reached the paddock and Sarah took a deep breath, appreciating the raw power of nature surging around them. But as the rain poured relentlessly, she spotted something out of the corner of her eye, a faint light flickering in her peripheral vision. "Is that?" She squinted through the sheets of rain, straining to see. It was a figure stumbling through the storm coming into view. Panic surged as she realized it could be anyone, a neighbor, an errant stranger, or worse, someone lost in the chaos. "Jake, stay close," she instructed, her heart racing as she branded thoughts of danger onto her mind. With the storm roiling furiously behind them, she grabbed Jake's reins, urging him toward the faint glow dot. As they approached, the dim light revealed a soaked figure clumsily moving in their direction. "Hello?" Sarah called out, her voice barely penetrating the howling winds. "Are you okay?" The figure turned toward her and she gasped as recognition dawned. It was her husband, drenched and exhausted, but alive. "Sarah," he shouted, relief flooding his voice. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions, joy, fear, anger colliding within her. What was he doing out here in such weather? "Where have you been?" she exclaimed, rushing toward him, dragging Jake along with her. As she reached him, an electrifying tension hung in the air. He looked disheveled, his eyes wide with concern as he took stock of their surroundings. "I was caught in traffic on my way back," he explained breathlessly, wiping rain from his face. "But I couldn't stay away. I need to be with you both." But Sarah was taken aback, her heart jarring with a mix of relief and frustration. She had struggled alone during his absence, and while his return filled her with warmth, she felt a twinge of resentment sneak in. "You should have stayed away from that road. You don't understand how dangerous this is," she almost shouted, feeling the deep longing for connection battling with years of built-up resentment as thunder rumbled overhead. Jake snorted uneasily and Sarah turned to him for comfort. But then she saw her husband's eyes, the way they searched hers, pleading for understanding. "I'm here now and that's what matters," he insisted, stepping closer. In that moment, with the storm raging around them, she felt a shift in the air. Old wounds began to crack open, exposing raw feelings that had long been buried beneath layers of neglect and silence. Yet here was Jake, steadfast and unwavering, a silent reminder of what truly mattered. "Let's get inside before we're swept away," Sarah said, shaking her head as she struggled to push her feelings of anger aside. She took a step back, sending a calming pat down Jake's neck, reminding herself to breathe. Together, they raced back to the shelter of the barn, rain lashing against their backs. Inside, the storm felt distant, almost muffled by the thick walls. As they shook off precipitation, Sarah felt an undeniable tension twisting in her stomach. It was a new chapter that dawned as the rain continued to pelt down. Outside a narrative not just of isolation, but of interconnectedness, vulnerability, and ultimately, transformation. Amidst the chaos of nature, Sarah felt a flicker of hope beginning to rise, a sign that even amid storms, both literal and metaphorical, there was always a chance to rebuild. And as she and her husband stood together, drenched and panting, she couldn't ignore the strength of their shared bond. She would need to confront the distance that had grown during his absence, just as she would confront the calm after the storm, and the new chapters waiting beneath the clouds. The decision, the storm subsided, leaving a heavy blanket of silence in its wake. Sarah stood in the barn, still damp from the rain, her heart racing not just from the weather, but from the whirlwind of emotions that had crashed like waves over her life. Jake nuzzled her shoulder, providing an anchor amid the turmoil. But even his comforting presence couldn't dispel the doubts swirling in her mind. Her husband, Mark, stood in the corner of the barn, shaking wet hair from his eyes as he tried to piece together what had just transpired. The tension between them was a palpable force, the air heavy with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he started, his voice low. "I didn't mean to worry you. I thought something had happened to you." She shot back, unable to contain the frustration that bubbled beneath the surface. "You just vanished without a word." The warmth of the barn felt stifling, and she looked away, focusing instead on Jake, who stood patiently, sensing the rising tension. Mark stepped closer. "We need to talk about this," he said, his tone a mix of urgency and desperation. "You don't understand how hard it's been for me out there, away from you." Sarah felt her heart twist. Hadn't she experienced the difficulty of isolation too? Yet here he was, back in her life, and she was still grappling with feelings of betrayal and resentment. The chasm between them felt impossibly wide, but she realized she had to confront their reality. It was time to make a decision not just about their relationship, but about her own path forward. The following days were a cacophony of emotions. The rain had washed away the lingering storm clouds, but the heaviness in Sarah's heart remained. Jake was her solace as she rode through the fields, the rhythmic sound of his hooves giving her a sense of clarity she desperately needed. As they trotted across the vibrant green pastures, the world felt alive around them. But deep within, thoughts consumed her. Without Mark truly present, how had she grown? What did she want for her future? Each ride became less of an escape and more of a journey into her own feelings. She began to see the fractures in her life. Years of neglect and the longing for connection that had led her to Jake. One moonlit night, her solitude was interrupted by footsteps outside the barn. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw Mark approaching. He had been trying hard to reconnect, and part of her appreciated his efforts. But the lingering feelings of abandonment clung stubbornly. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above. A whisper reverberating against the barn's wooden walls. "About what?" she replied, crossing her arms defensively. "You can't just come back and expect everything to be fine." "I understand," he said, his tone earnest. "But we need to find our way back to each other. You've changed, and I see that. I want to understand how to support you." "Support me?" she echoed incredulously. "Where were you when I needed you most?" "That's not fair," he protested, frustration shadowing his features. "I had no choice but to work." "You know that, do I?" She snapped back, the heat of anger rising. "You left me alone to manage everything here." "I fought through that storm, Mark, both out there and in here." She gestured to her heart. "And you didn't even check in." The air crackled with tension, and for a moment the world outside the barn faded away. "I want to understand," Mark pleaded, desperation coating his words. "I want to be here for you, but I didn't know how." His sincerity cut through her anger, if only slightly. She softened, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't even know what I need from you anymore." "I think you do," he replied gently. "You've grown so much. I've watched you from afar. You're stronger than I ever knew, and I want to support you in whatever you choose." Her heart fluttered unexpectedly at his words. But there was fear there too, fear of falling back into old patterns, the fear of vulnerability. She took a step back, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. "Please, just give me time," she eventually said, looking away, unsure of what to do next. The following weeks were filled with a visible distance. Mark tried, desperately reaching for her with gestures and words, but they felt hollow, like whispers dancing in the wind. Even as they shared space in the barn and at the dinner table, Sarah felt a lingering tension, the old wounds too fresh to ignore. Then, one afternoon, as Sarah rode Jake across the now familiar trails, she felt a stirring in her heart, a reminder of the competition approaching. It had been her dream to enter, but in her current state, it felt like a distant fantasy. "Do you think we can do it?" she asked Jake as they cantered together, the pressure of the upcoming challenge echoing in her mind. For the first time in a long while, enthusiasm surged within her, igniting hope. When she returned to the barn, she found Mark mucking out stalls. He looked up, and his expression was one of expectation. "Did you have a good ride?" "It was freeing," she admitted, her heart racing as she wrestled with her decision. And I've been thinking. Mark straightened, a glimmer of hope lighting his eyes. About what? About entering the competition, she said, her voice stronger than before. I want to test myself, push the boundaries. It's important to me. I think that's a great idea. He exclaimed, his enthusiasm genuine. You've worked hard and you deserve to pursue your dreams. But as his words sank in, Sarah felt an unfamiliar flutter of uncertainty. Was this encouragement sincere, or was he simply trying to placate her? She needed to know if he would truly support her if she was destined to chart this course alone. Will you help me prepare? She asked cautiously, searching for clarity. In his demeanor, of course, yes. He stepped closer, his eyes ablaze with excitement. We'll get everything ready. I promise I'll be there for you this time. Yet with his affirmative, a gnawing sensation crept back into Sarah's heart. Was she willing to risk everything, including her newfound independence, for a relationship that hadn't always supported her? The shadows of doubt cast over her thoughts, and as she began to truly contemplate her future, dread twisted within her. The preparations soon began. Day by day, they worked alongside each other, polishing their routines in tandem even though the unspoken tension between them lingered. Mark held the reins of Jake while Sarah practiced her moves, each misstep sending jolts of frustration through. Their collaboration despite his best intentions, there were moments when Sarah felt suffocated by his presence. They would share a silent meal at the table, the air thick with things left unsaid. And it was during these moments that the sense of isolation returned, threatening to smother the connection they were trying to forge. One evening, as they trained, under the observant gaze of the setting sun, Sarah felt the weight of her decision crashing down on her. I need to know what you truly want from us, she said, abruptly halting her movements. Are we just going through the motions? Do you really want to build a life together, or are you trying to reclaim something lost? The question hung heavy in the air, and she saw Mark's expression shift. He hesitated, as if grappling with the very answer that could determine their future, hers and his. I want to be with you, Sarah, he admitted finally, his honesty filling the space between them. But I realize I need to listen to you and understand your dreams in their entirety. Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes as she felt a flicker of warmth igniting her heart. After everything, could they forge a new beginning? The answer eluded her, but she knew one thing was clear. She had to face the truth, both about her feelings for Mark and her aspirations for herself. That night, lying in bed, she envisioned what lay ahead, with Jake as an unwavering constant. In her life, she felt a resurgence of confidence. She could ride, compete, and perhaps even redefine her relationship with Mark. Yet, deep down, Sarah knew that she had to be willing to take risks not just with her actions, but with her heart. The morning light filtered through her window, illuminating her resolve. Come what may, it was time to make her decision. Standing at the intersection of her past and future, she was ready to ride into the unknown. As she drew in a deep breath, a sense of calm washed over her. Life was meant to be lived courageously. And for the first time, she felt truly ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, whether it be the thrill of competition or the complexities of rekindling love. Tomorrow would mark a new chapter. And with Jake by her side, Sarah felt invincible. Training triumphs as the days chased each other on the calendar, Sarah found herself enveloped in a whirlwind of training, anticipation, and uncertainty. The countdown to the riding competition drew nearer, just days away, and it had become her singular focus. Each effort she put in with Jake was like layering the foundation of a dream that both excited and terrified her. Mark was ever present, either holding the reins or timing her routines, his encouragement infused in every command. Yet Sarah couldn't shake the lingering questions in her heart. Could their relationship withstand the weight of her growing independence? One morning, the sun peeked over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the barn. Sarah arrived outside, to find Jake waiting for her, his coat gleaming like freshly polished mahogany. After brushing him down and saddling him up, they stepped outside into the fresh morning air. Today's the day we start tackling the course, she determined aloud, her heart racing with excitement and nerves. We've got to practice our jumps and turns. As she mounted Jake, a feeling of partnership surged between them. With one smooth movement, they moved into a canter, soaring through the lush fields as if they were floating above the earth. Jake seemed to sense her energy, matching it stride for stride, their connection unintentionally deepening in their shared passion. But as they approached the jump courses in the nearby arena, Sarah's heart sank slightly. The obstacles looked daunting, towering over her with an air of intimidation she had to confront. Mark stood at the far end of the arena, watching closely, the faintest hint of anxiety etched across his face. "Okay, buddy. Let's take it slow," she said to Jake, feeling a rush of determination gain momentum. They started with the smallest jump, a beginner's height that served as a measure of her abilities. With every jump they completed, her confidence swelled. Rhythm of the ride became intoxicating. "Good boy," she called out as they cleared the first obstacle. Mark cheered from the sidelines, and for a moment, the competitive edge of the event faded as the joy of riding swept over them. Encouraged, she opted to raise the height for the next jump, her pulse quickening. As they prepared to take off, Sarah felt a rush, blending fear with exhilaration, but this time the jump was higher and instinct kicked in as they soared into the air. For a heart-stopping moment, everything felt suspended, and then, just as they were about to clear it, she felt Jake falter. His hooves grazed the edge, and they landed awkwardly, sending a spray of dirt flying. "No," she gasped, instinctively pulling on the reins. Jake stumbled, but they managed to regain their footing. Heart racing, she let out a breath she didn't. No, she was holding both shaken and invigorated. She saw Mark's expression shift from cheer to concern. "Are you okay?" he called out, rushing toward her as she dismounted, feeling shaky but intact. "Yeah, just a little off balance," she replied, trying to steady herself. "That jump was a bit too much." Mark looked at her, eyes wide. "You pushed yourself. Maybe we should slow down." "No," Sarah asserted, surprising herself with her intensity. "I need to practice. I can't lean on you or hold back because I'm afraid." Mark's brow furrowed and he stepped back as if her words had struck a nerve. "I just don't want you to get hurt," he argued, but Sarah could see the frustration hanging in the air between them. "I won't get hurt unless I stop trying," she countered, fire in her voice. "I need this, Mark. I need to know what I'm capable of without constantly worrying about what you think." He opened his mouth to respond, but then closed it, an inscrutable expression crossing his face. It was as if he hadn't anticipated her fierce determination. "Okay, but let's take it step by step." He finally relented. They spent the next several hours training, each jump becoming a little more effortless as they practiced together. The rhythm of their partnership began to adapt, and despite the earlier tension, Sarah could see Mark's admiration growing as she tackled the obstacles with renewed vigor. Days rolled into the evening before the competition, and Sarah found herself awake, restlessly tossing in her bed. Anxiety gnawed at her, each thought of inadequacy turning her stomach. What if she didn't perform well? What if she let everyone down, including herself? In that moment, she glanced out the window at the stars glimmering against the velvety night sky. It reminded her of cozy nights spent with Jake, showing quiet moments under the vast open sky. Determined, she swiftly dressed and made her way to the barn, where she found Jake dozing lightly. "Hey there, big guy," she murmured, slipping inside. She felt a wave of calm wash over her as she gently stroked his mane. "It's almost time for us to shine. Are you ready?" Jake raised his head with a nicker, almost as if he understood her words. Gripping his halter, she leaned against him, taking a deep breath. In that moment, she felt a connection deeper than mere companionship. It was a bond forged through every challenge they had faced together. The following morning dawned crisp and bright, the air filled with palpable anticipation. As they arrived at the competition venue, Sarah felt a rush of disbelief at the sheer number of people gathered. The atmosphere crackled with excitement and her heart raced while mounting Jake, the weight of her dreams hanging on this moment. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself, her heart beating in synchrony with Jake's. Mark settled closer, giving her an encouraging nod. "You've got this, Sarah. Trust in yourself." At the starting line, adrenaline surged through her veins, and as they approached the first jump, she felt the familiar buzz of excitement and fear. But this time, she held herself steady. "Let's do this, Jake," she commanded, leaning forward, the bond they shared igniting her courage. They soared over the first jump effortlessly. With each obstacle they cleared, a swell of confidence began to surge within her, overwhelming the whispers of doubt that had plagued her all week. The crowd's cheers echoed around her, fueling an energy that propelled them forward. But suddenly, as they approached the final jump, her breath hitched in her throat. It was taller than anything they had tackled before. Visibly shaken, she felt her heart racing faster than ever. Could they clear it? Could she trust herself to guide Jake through? Come on, you can do this, she shouted, urging him forward as they approached the jump. Time seemed to slow, every moment stretching infinitely. She knew she had to commit wholeheartedly. As they took off, she felt the wind whip through her hair, a rush of exhilaration flooding her senses. In that split second, she considered everything. She'd overcome the loneliness, the abandoned dreams, and the rekindled love with Mark. With a deep breath, she focused solely on Jake, their connection snapping into place like a well-oiled machine. And then they were airborne, suspended in the air as the crowd gasped. Every heart in the audience held its breath as if time had stopped. Just as they began to descend, Sarah felt a moment of doubt creeping in, but she pushed it aside, determined. With a gentle pull on the reins, she guided Jake down to a clean landing, and they thundered towards the finish line, the ground vibrating beneath them. Cheers erupted from the crowd as they crossed the plain, and Sarah's exhilaration soared. They had done it! She felt a rush of triumph fill her heart, filling every crevice once burdened with doubt. But as she slowed Jake to a stop, an unexpected voice broke through the celebratory atmosphere. Sarah! Turning, she saw Mark sprinting toward her, his expression a mix of awe and concern. That was incredible. He reached her side, breathless. Really? You think so? The realization of their triumph mingled with the strong pulse of uncertainty in her chest. As they dismounted, the audience's applause echoed in her ears, but she felt a different kind of pressure building between them. Mark's pride shone brightly. Yet, with it came a familiar ounce of anxiety. Was this genuine, or was he struggling with the reality of her independence? In that moment, as they stood on the precipice of celebration and uncertainty, the world around them dimmed. There was a truth in their connection she could no longer ignore. It was time to face the abundance of feelings that were waiting to spill forth. Let's talk, Sarah said suddenly, her heart racing with unfiltered honesty. Mark opened his mouth to respond, his expression shifting from admiration to confusion, but she pressed on, urgency blooming in her chest. Today marked more than just a competition. It was a turning point. Whatever happens, I want us to be real with each other. This is just the beginning, and I need you by my side now with your expectations, but as my partner. Mark nodded slowly, struggling to find the right words. But as the applauding crowd swirled around them, she knew that the connection they shared was no longer just about riding into the sunset. It was about embracing the complexity of love, the strength of independence, and the beauty of what lay ahead. In the aftermath of victory, a new journey awaited them both. And as they looked across the arena filled with spectators, she felt a surge of hope blooming in the space between them. The past had equipped her with wisdom, the present revealed strength, and the future it could be anything they made it. The journey had just begun, and she was ready to ride towards whatever awaited them, arm in arm with Jake and standing beside the man who had once been a stranger but was now so much more than she had ever imagined.